Hello everyone, I hope you're doing great today and I hope you enjoyed these stories. Make sure you check out my Patreon if you want early access to my stories, and make sure you check out the podcast in the description below that will have all of my stories uploaded there too. I have a quick message before the story starts, so if you want to go straight to the stories, and there's timestamps in the description for that below. So just quickly, whatever you're struggling with or any of your battles with your mental health, it can and will get better. I believe in you and you just have to stay consistent and stay in the fight. So I hope everyone enjoys the stories and has a great weekend. Take care, I'll speak to you all soon. I had a long career spanning many different things and I wore lots of different hats throughout my time. Now some of the most interesting ones happened when I was a lot younger than I am now. I remembered a job that I truly enjoyed and still felt pride about doing, even to this day, was when I was a fire ranger. Now it basically meant I'd have to brave the scary stairs going up to the top of those big old towers and just keeping a watch out for anything that could be potentially dangerous or a fire. A lot of people don't realise we do more than just look for fires specifically up there, and it's a relatively difficult job because you have to look out for other people and other things you might not think about. And of course you have to try and stay sane up there yourself and make sure that you're not seeing things. Now this is actually quite difficult to do, especially if you spend all of your time alone there. Now most of the time I was there I thoroughly enjoyed the experience, so sometimes I guess the isolation or loneliness would get to me. If ever it got like that, I'd just go down for a little while and just start reading books for a few minutes while periodically looking around to make sure there wasn't anything out of the ordinary. Now there'd been a rumour going round for years about some kind of figure with a dark robe that would just appear in the background and you could kind of see through it. It would be hard to describe, but it was almost like when the setting was very dark, this would stand out as being completely out of the ordinary. People described it as a child kind of facing away from you and slowly fading off into the trees. Originally I didn't really believe it too much. I was more worried about another issue we had. There was an old cabin out there, right in the middle of nowhere in the area that we would cover, and there would always be reports of an elderly gentleman sitting down at the table who would seemingly be completely oblivious to everyone else. Whenever we went out there to actually go and figure out what was going on or say, hey, you're not meant to be there, he would seemingly disappear as soon as you got close. For a while we wondered if it was an optical illusion, and we actually took out all of the remaining furniture from in there, but he kept on appearing. That was up until there was a really big fire there. What made this place really interesting though is that once it had all burnt down, you could see a basement that we didn't know existed, and there's still some of the path to get down into it now. But anyway, that's the story for another time. Today I'd like to share this one with you. I'd been doing my shift for a while now, and not much was out of the ordinary. We did have something weird that I had to investigate at one point. It was probably about 1 o'clock in the afternoon and everything was normal. Like I said, nothing was out of the ordinary this day, and it's actually quite peaceful. It's relatively cold out during this moment, and I had a report from some people hiking that apparently they'd seen strange figures not moving out in the forest. I felt, oh god, this is great, this is just what I need when everything's going so well. Kind of hesitant to believe what they're actually seeing and worried that maybe they'll come across a dead body, I decided to investigate. Now the problem is, when I was trying to investigate this, they couldn't really tell me the location they're in. They actually needed help getting back to the main areas. This was actually relatively annoying because it meant I had to spend about 10 days trying to give them directions. Of course it's an exaggeration, but when there's not really reference points, it becomes increasingly difficult for people to know where you're talking about, especially out here, but that's understandable. I eventually wave them off and call in that I need to go and investigate something, and they say it's fine, they're going to cover me for a bit. I have to wait for a while for the other ranger to come over and quickly get into my tower so I can go out there. I tell them that it's potentially a body, and they say just proceed with caution because you don't know who's out there. After waiting for a good half hour or so, eventually my cover came. We said hey, and the other ranger said, "Do you want to take the truck out? It's already running." I said sure. I got in and immediately some sound blasted my eardrum. It scared the life out of me. I took a second before I realised that he had the radio on absolute blast, and honestly it left a ringing in my ear. He apologised, not realising it was going to come on again, but honestly it annoyed me because it really unsettled me. I drove round to the rough area that the hikers were able to tell me that they saw the figures, and I found absolutely nothing. The trees are quite dense in this area, and there's lots of shadows cast by the trees, so it actually becomes relatively difficult to navigate or see anything. Regardless of isolation, your mind will play tricks on you, and luckily for me, nothing was out of the ordinary. I decide to head off a little further now and leave the truck. I don't have a flashlight or anything because it's still quite early in the day at this point. I just decide that I need to go and see what's up. I'm not that far away from a stream, which I actually find really peaceful, and I decide that after a while of looking, I'm gonna go and rest here for a little bit. I can't see anything out of the ordinary at first. I just constantly look behind myself to make sure that I don't get lost on my little journey. I proceed ahead but don't find much of anything, deciding that it's probably best just to go over to the stream and relax. Now the area itself is really beautiful. I decide just to stand off to the embankment and appreciate how beautiful this place is. If you're hiking, you can do a really nice loop around here, and honestly it's breathtaking. It's the kind of place that no matter where you take a picture, you could put it on a wall, if that makes sense. I find a nice little spot and sit down, just on a rock that's out of the moisture from the ground. I take a few moments just to meditate and decide to be silent. This can actually be quite a good technique if you can't find anything on a search. That's because you're probably going to hear people if you can't see them, if there's any about. I start to think more and more that the hikers are just kind of losing it a bit and are just playing tricks with me, so I decide that I should probably head back. I then leave the stream and jokingly say goodbye, knowing that I don't want to leave this area so soon. I then make it back to the truck and I start off again in the direction that I've come. I radio in that I've not found anything, but I'll be coming back soon. I drive for about another 2 minutes and I spot it. Someone just standing there, staring off into the tree line. It's quite difficult to make out exactly what they're wearing, but they kind of look like a grey colour. They almost seem too still to be human, which I think's really odd. I stop quickly, and before I get out, I decide to grab my binoculars. I then realise that I don't have them. Oh no, I've left them in the tower, I realise. I decide the best thing I can do is very slowly make my way over there instead of announcing my presence. I think it's odd they've not moved at all or really reacted to the sound of the truck, or maybe they didn't hear it. There can be an issue if it's like a lost hiker or someone who's hit their head and they're kind of shocked or not really in a normal state of mind. I realise that this person's probably about 5 feet tall and just standing there completely still. What's really odd about it is they almost look like they're covered in bones, if that makes sense. I slowly edge closer and closer and I can't believe what I'm seeing. I can see a person standing there perfectly still, but they don't look right. It looks like they're not wearing any clothes, but I can see them and they're right in front of me. I then get a little closer and realise that it's not a person at all. It's an arrangement of wood, perfectly resembling a person. I look to my left and I can't see anything else. I've just come from the right side, so I know I should be pretty safe to investigate. I very hesitantly make my way up to this weird thing, and it's basically a figure made out of wood and carvings to perfectly resemble a person. I think, there's no dead body at least. But who put it here and why? I think this is extremely odd, and it's still something that kind of scares me a bit when I think of it. I go to the other side and there's no face. I look up and my heart drops. There's two more figures further off, but they're more like people this time. I quickly duck down but realise it's futile. These people are standing there by the stream that I've literally just come from. They literally look like headless figures. I realise now that there's something really odd here, but I'm not sure whether they're people or not, or just more of these things. I can then see another behind and another. I realise then that they're forming a circle. I realise now that I'm not in too much danger and slowly make my way over. And I'll be surprised. They are wooden figures, just like the other one, just not very detailed this time. Standing there, placed perfectly while being still. It's very bizarre because their hands are relatively detailed and it really gives me the creeps. I look around for whoever put these here, but it's literally like somebody's just placed them out of nowhere. I think this is really bizarre. Maybe it's some kind of art project that I'm not aware of, but that doesn't make sense. I almost think for a second it's kind of cool. I take a moment to scour the horizon and I can't see anything else and decide that it's really time to head back. I can't wait to report this in because this is really weird. I slowly begin making my way back towards the truck and I take one last look at these things. And they haven't moved, thankfully. I kind of expected them to move forward. I almost thought about, for a joke, bringing one on the back of the truck and just setting it up somewhere to scare the other guy that was working with me. But I think this is a bad idea, and I don't really want to get in trouble or get some weird reputation at work. So I decide just to head over and act like nothing was wrong and just say, "Hey, I'm coming over, sorry about the delay," on the radio. And then make it back to the tower and say, "Hey, I'm here, Andy." He says, "Hey, come on up quickly," and I make my way up. Now I haven't told him anything at this point, and he says, "There's something weird. I keep seeing something white just off in the distance, sort of moving around and disappearing every so often periodically." I say, "Oh, I know just what that is. I've literally just come across some really weird sculptures in the middle of this forest. They look very much like people, but do you know about any art projects?" "Art projects?" Andy laughs and says, "No, of course not. Who would put them out here?" He says, "Did you bring one with you?" And I jokingly said, "Yeah, I did. It's right here behind me." And he says, "No, cut it off. Did you actually bring one?" I say, "No, why would I do that?" I tell him roughly where it is so he can go and investigate, and he says he's going to check it out later. He then says, "Seriously, did you see anything out there unusual?" I say, "Yeah, of course, the figures," but he says, "No, any actual people." I say no, and that I'm pretty sure there's no bodies out here that we have to look for, and he says that's a relief. He thinks too the hikers probably saw this and got confused and scared. Now, are you absolutely certain the hikers didn't leave these here? I say, "Yes, Andy, of course. I would have told you, and why would I have investigated?" He said sorry for the stupid question, but he says he really wants to keep an eye out on this figure he saw. Now, at the time, he'd been working quite a few long shifts and never reported anything like it before, so I say, "Come on, just relax. I think it's just the isolation getting to you," and he says, "You're right." He then hands over the reins to me once again, and we say our goodbyes. He says he's going to check it out on the way and takes the truck with him, and with that he leaves. Now I do keep my eye out for probably a good another 20 minutes trying to see anything out there, but I don't see anything at all. Every so often the trees kind of move, and I think this is odd, but I think it's just where I'm staring at it for too long. I look around in the rough area that Andy's drove off to, and there it is. A white figure just standing there perfectly. I really start laughing to myself, realizing what he's done. He's placed one of them wooden figures there, obviously to scare me. I think, you could have got me with that, to be honest. And I turn around and just completely ignore it. I then decide that I should call on him and make sure that he got back okay. And he did. I say, that was a nice little prank you did on me. And he says, what prank? I say, yeah, leaving that thing there. And he sounds very confused, and his confusion actually put fear into me. He's 100% certain that he hasn't done anything the type. He said, listen, all I've done is drove back. And I was kind of freaked out by that figure I saw earlier. That's when the penny dropped. There's definitely something up now. I say, I'm going to investigate it quickly. He says, please check in with me again. And I say, yeah, I will, I promise. And I quickly head down from the tower. I look up, and the thing's gone. I was certain I saw one of those wooden figures there earlier. And I feel stupid now going back saying that there's nothing there. I get on the radio and say, oh, don't worry, it's probably just nothing. I think it's just my mind messing with me from what you said earlier. I always thought I had an overactive imagination. And he says, yeah, just be careful, buddy. Something's definitely up. With that, the radio switches off, and I decide to lay down for a bit. Now, I was actually pretty bored most of the times up here, so I decided to do some drawings. I decide that I'm just going to draw the horizons and some of the landscapes around me. To be honest, this is actually quite good because it really keeps my mind active. It'd be really funny if I drew a big fire and didn't realise it until afterwards, right? But anyway, I start my drawings and keep checking out for any danger periodically again. And then I see it once more. There's a white figure out there, definitely moving and somewhat glowing. That was the part I really don't understand. It was literally illuminating some kind of light, or at least that's how it appeared. That's it. I have to investigate now. I quickly grab my jacket and put my pencil down and decide that I'm gonna have to figure out what's wrong here, because this is really odd. I'm much more cautious now because the night sets in, and my eyes haven't really adjusted to the darkness that well because I had a small lamp on so I could do my drawings. Now I get to the bottom of the steps and I start heading in the direction that I saw this weird figure in. At first I start jogging, then I realise how unfit I am and I have to stop after about 30 seconds. That's odd. I've always been pretty in shape, but maybe I've just let myself go a bit. Who knows? I then go to the exact area where I saw this thing not 5 minutes ago and there's nothing there. As I'm standing there, I can hear a faint laughter. It's really creepy because it literally sounds like a small child laughing. I suddenly feel very faint and realise that maybe there's a missing child out here. I have to figure out what this is now. I suddenly become more brave and start sprinting towards where I think the sound's coming from. I run and run and I don't seem to be getting any closer to the sound. I'm quiet for a moment and I can just hear the sounds of the nature and the trees around me, and I realise that something's wrong. Why has the sound stopped suddenly? Why couldn't I find it? Then, just ahead again, I can see some white figure just moving behind a tree. I decide that I have to jog over there now and figure out what this is. This time it doesn't move luckily and I say, hey, I've got you, to myself, half expecting to find either somebody out here who's completely off their mind that's fell and hit their head, or maybe a lost child even. But this seems a little too big now. I sprint and get just to the edge of the tree and decide I'm going to jump out and shout freeze, just in case it's anyone dodgy. And I jump, freeze, nothing. Not a sound. I look around quickly and do a 360 and I can't find anything. I decide that I should get back to the station now and maybe call in some help, and I head out. I start picking up the pace and I can hear my footsteps slowly getting louder and louder as I'm somewhat panicking now and walking somewhat clumsily at more of a hiker's pace. Now I swear to you, as I got onto the first steps of my tower, that I can hear laughter again. I stop for a moment to confirm it, then very quickly start going up the steps. I get back in and radio in what I've heard, and that's when my friend Andy says that that's exactly what he heard too. A strange faint laughter, but he thought it was coming from me originally. He says unless you have 100% confirmation, there's not much he could do, but just to be careful and not worry too much. Be careful? That's great. How am I going to sleep at night now? I think. Yeah, I can lock the door off, but that's not really an effective way to stop somebody breaking in. Anyone could just bust the door in, or even set fire to this thing or knock it over or God knows what. I say yeah, that's fine, and I decide that I really need to figure out what's wrong here. I sit on kind of like the balcony thing where I can see around, but this is one-dimensional, mind you, but I don't see much of anything. I think maybe, just maybe, I've been out here for too long, and you know what they say, you can only see faces you've dreamt of. Maybe I was so tired I was kind of half dreaming and it was based off the wooden figures I saw before. But then I remembered, what were they? Why were they out there? Strangely enough, they seemed relatively similar in height to that thing that I saw. And maybe Andy wasn't actually seeing anything and there was a reason for me to be concerned. Now, I half fall asleep on top of this balcony again, and kind of hit my head to wake myself up, which is actually quite funny. I remembered laughing, think, well, there's my alarm clock, as I raised my head up, and just at the base of my tower, I can see a white figure somewhat glowing. I wipe my eyes and think, this cannot be real, this must be some kind of dream. I quickly look at my watch and I've only been asleep for about 10 minutes. In my dream, I felt like I was there for an eternity, but of course I wasn't. It was only a number of minutes. But I have to investigate now. I'm very convinced that my mind's just gone a little bit weird, and I decide to head down. When I take my very first step, I can hear something running. I think, right, I've got you now. I lurch forward but nearly go off the edge of the tower because I'm still not really woken up at this point, and I'm almost off balance. I manage to steady myself and much slower now make my way down. I say hey. There's nothing. I then shout out another hey again, and I'm met with silence. I'm actually getting relatively frustrated now, and I kid you not, I can hear the laughing once again. I spin around and I can see the figure. Now, through coincidence or not, it was actually heading to where I saw the wooden sculptures earlier. I didn't realise this at the time, but looking back on it is kind of weird. This thing is kind of sprinting off into that direction, suddenly not making any sound at all. And me being me, I sprint straight after it, thinking maybe it is somebody that's really off their head now and needs emergency medical attention or maybe an evacuation. I know if you hit certain parts of your head you can really lose it due to the brain swelling, but if you have brain swelling due to the intracranial pressure, you can easily die from it within a matter of hours, and if that was the case, then this person wouldn't have much longer left. So, I chase after them. Now, I'm struggling for direction at this point, but I can always see the tower, so I know roughly where I'm going. I never seem to be able to catch up with this thing, which is really weird because based off the adrenaline I have and my long legs, I can sprint pretty quick, and it doesn't make sense for pretty much anything to be able to outrun me out here, especially because as a fire ranger I'm always out in the forest. I'm always going to have that edge of knowing the environment and being used to the terrain, but it didn't seem to apply now, which is really bizarre. It was almost like this thing had a supernatural ability to be able to just, I don't know, vanish at will. I ran as quick as I possibly could for as long as possible until eventually I had to catch my breath once again. Now I sprinted and sprinted until eventually I got to the exact spot that I saw this thing go to, just behind some of the trees and down a small hill, and there was nothing. kind of worried that now something bigger than what I know about is happening. I feel pretty scared, and I just stop and put my hand into my head and just sit there for a moment. I realise now that I'm not really chasing this thing. Whatever this thing is kind of playing a game with me almost, and I'm not sure how to make it stop. That's when I see it. Some strange light just illuminating behind me. I stand up and turn around to see what it is, and for a few seconds, I can see a very bright figure just standing there about 5 feet tall, too bright for me to be able to look at properly, literally hurting my eyes. And then, I wake up off the floor. Now, what's really weird is that when I come to, it's not like I'm out of it, I'm immediately with my senses again, but something just feels different this time. The atmosphere just feels completely different. I get up and look around and realise that my eyes really hurt, like when you've been staring at the sun for too long, like really bad. Even to the point that, you know when you've looked at something bright and it kind of lingers in your eyes for a second and goes weird colours, I still have that just a little bit. I look up at the sky and I can still see the stars, so luckily I'm not blinded, so I'm happy about that. Now, in somewhat a state of shock and confusion, I look around and realise that lots of the scrubs and things on the floor have kind of burnt a bit. It's very difficult to describe, but it's almost like the life has been sucked out of them, similar to when something was burnt, but through heat but not fire, if that makes sense. And it pretty much forms a perfect circle around where I'm standing. I look down at my arms and they're somewhat sunburnt almost, appearing much more red than usual, and it's not on the other side of my arms too, which is really odd. I feel my face and that's completely fine, but my arms are quite burnt, which is something I've never experienced before. I look around and this thing is long gone. Luckily for me, there is evidence of this circle here, so I decide now that I'm going to have to get back to the tower, and in a moment of clarity realise that I should get a shift on and start travelling very quickly. In no time at all I make it back up to the tower and radio in what's happened, and Andy, bless him, comes over to see what happened. Upon arrival he says, "God, what happened to your arms?" And I can't really explain it in the moment and just say, "Look, you have to come here." I take him back to the exact spot where that flash was and I explain what happened, and he can't believe his eyes. It's almost like there was a small heat wave around this area only, and so much of the circle has died. It's only about 6 feet across, but it's all the same, and it forms almost a perfect circle. He says that he's going to radio it in and just to take a break for a moment, and that's what he does. I go with him back up to the tower, and he says that he's going to stay with me for the rest of the night to make sure nothing else happens, and that's what he does. I fall asleep quite quickly and I'm woken up by the pain of the burning on my arms. We make eye contact, and you know when your look can say 1,000 words? It's one of those moments. He just nods and we both know that we have to go back to that circle again. On the walk he tells me nothing else has happened, but he really needs sleep. But we get there, and thankfully for our sanity it's still there. The cover come over and we decided not to tell them what happened. We've already made a report about it and we don't want to scare them, and we need to confirm it's not only us seeing these things, and we say goodbye to them, and luckily Andy offers to drive me home. Now nothing ever come of that investigation, and we never saw that flash of light again. I'm still not sure exactly what it is, but it must be something paranormal. And what's really truly bizarre is that life never grew in that spot again. Eventually the ground just becomes somewhat sodded dirt, but nothing ever grew again. Literally for about another 10 years that I was working there. It still is and has remained one of the most unexplainable things that ever happened to me, and I can only really think of it as being paranormal, or some kind of supernatural energy that we're not supposed to mess with, and somehow I ended up doing so unwillingly. Now, this is when I was only about 7, and we're camping near a spring we swam at often. Now, I woke up one morning and went down to the spring to wash up, and there's a huge alligator that hissed at me from the bank. It was probably 20 feet long and easily 5 times my height. I stopped and ran out of there. Weird things happen in the Appalachian Mountains. They're as old as time itself, and people who have lived there may be the first to tell you that it can become otherworldly, and sometimes you just have to turn a blind eye for your own sanity, or you'll just be like, yep, this is just how it is. I grew up in a small town outside of Pishwan National Forest. Lots of waterfalls, hikes, great views. It's an amazing place to be, especially in summer, but what happened to me was in the dead of winter, when I was about 17. Before I write all of this, let me preface by saying at the time, I just got my very first prescription glasses and still wasn't really used to keeping them on 24/7. But although my vision was blurry, I know something just isn't right when I see it. When I was 17, I decided to do my senior project on nature photography. What better place to take some great photos of the forest? I said to my mother if she'd drive me into Big Ash and let me take some pictures as she winded through the woods. It was winter, so the trees were bare and the sky was grey. It was still fairly pretty out, to be honest, and I just wanted to take some pictures of the local flora. So my mum pulls over to let me walk down a trail that I've been over hundreds of times. After a short walk through the woods, you end up on the riverbank, a great swimming hole in the summer, and the way the bank curved, you could walk along the little stony shore a little way past the trail. Mind you, I was wearing a bright orange raincoat, so it was incredibly visible. So I'm crouching down to take a picture of an old railroad spike that's been sticking out of the earth for years when, all of a sudden, I realise there's no sound. Like, honestly, it was really scarily silent. No birds chirping, no nature sounds or anything. It's like I didn't even hear the sound of water flowing. As this is happening, I realise exactly how visible and vulnerable I am. If you've experienced some kind of primal fear, you'll know what I mean. It's like an alarm bell's going off in your head screaming danger, danger. As I'm sitting there with this feeling washing over me, I start hearing crunching footsteps around. Again, all of the trees around are so bare that there isn't any foliage to block any view. I hear these footsteps slowly getting 2 feet closer and closer, and it's from the opposite side of the riverbank. I'm watching very closely and I can't move. Whatever I saw was all grey and not a human, but tall, and appears to be on 2 legs. It was getting closer and closer, and right as it's about to reach the bank of the river, I snapped out of the trance and really sprint. I've never been so scared in my life. I booked it back to my mum's car, and was so obviously out of breath that she says, "What's wrong?" After I explained what happened, she looked really scared and said that while I've gone down the trail, she got this weird fear that suddenly something was wrong, and was about to come and find me when I ran back. We left after that, and to this day, sometimes we will talk about it with no explanation. I've told my boyfriend this story, and he insists that it could have been a skinwalker. I've got no idea what it was, although I wish I'd gotten a better look. I'm glad I ran when I did. Has anyone experienced anything like this, or is it just me? My husband and his sister went hiking in September or November 2020 when this happened. They were hiking Sharp Top in Southwest Virginia. They hiked the entire trail without incident, but as they were coming down the trail back towards their car, they noticed a black, opaque figure at the foot of the trail near the road. This figure was almost opaque, but they see a white at the top where a face would be, but no other features. The best I can say second-handedly to describe it is a no-face from Sprint Away, but basically no facial features. It's roughly 5 or 6 feet tall and glided across the road to the tree line. Once it hit the tree line, it basically disappears. Now, it's weird too because it's soundlessly. It's fall, so there's plenty of leaves on the floor, so you would have heard something. He said they're roughly 40 yards away from it, but it was still light out for them to see fully what was happening. This was my husband's first experience with anything paranormal, but my SLL has experienced other things. We haven't found anything similar to this, but it was so weird. So in 1992, I went camping with 3 friends. We had all recently graduated high school. We're about 40 miles from the closest town in the desert canyon lands of the Utah border with Colorado. It was overcast, which made it so you can't really see further than your hand in front of the darkness. So we're sitting around a campfire having a beer, listening to the coyotes, when suddenly they really go quiet. I had a look at my friend to see if he notices it too, and he gives me a scared look, saying, "What the hell is that?" As I turned around and look up, everything seems to go dark. It really seemed silent for a long time. Even my thoughts were silent until eventually someone asked, "What happened?" My fuzzy brain remembered my flashlight. I turned it on and went to see why the fire went out. There was barely any coals. It looked like it had been out for a while and everyone was scared. There was this feeling that something strange had happened. Everybody agreed but couldn't think of what it is. I said to my friend, "What do you think it is that he saw?" but he couldn't remember saying anything. We're freaked out because the rest of the night we really want the sun to come up, and I can't explain what happened. We weren't drunk. I felt like we lost time but have no proof. I've always had this nagging feeling that something happened that we can't remember. Something negative and probably scary. I used to work on the north slope of Alaska in the oil industry. The work we were doing required us to travel far out into the Alaskan Petroleum Reserve, which is basically just untamed tundra wilderness for hundreds of miles. The oil companies would build these long ice roads in the winter that would actually lead to exploration drilling pads. Now basically, our job was to go out after they finished the initial drilling and test rock formations for oil producing qualities. It was mid-January, the sun hadn't quite come up yet, and when I say the sun hadn't come up, I mean in almost a month and a half, and the polar nights are intense. This particular well site we're travelling to was about 60 miles west of Alpine, Alaska, really deep into the wilderness. Our job took a week, but we managed to finish and are heading back to our camp to finish up for our hitch and go home. Now at the beginning of the end, the ice roads are guard shacks that you have to go into and check out for safety. There's no cell reception or radios working, only up at a distance. So if you don't check in or out at a set time, they'll actually come looking for you to make sure you're okay. Now it's about 4 in the morning. Not that it mattered in the land of endless night, and we're halfway across the ice roads. Travel was slow with the speed limit on the roads only 25 miles per hour. When something appears on the road in our headlights, it was a man in jeans and a sneakers and a hoodie, walking down an ice road in the wilderness at 4 AM in -20. It's not really unusual for locals to go out hunting, but I don't know, maybe his snowmobile broke down and he's trying to get back to the guard shack. He didn't acknowledge us at all as our trucks rolled up next to him. He kept shuffling forward and doesn't seem cold. His clothing, which is completely not suited for this weather, appears warm and dry, so it's definitely bizarre at that moment. I roll down the window and say, "Are you okay?" He doesn't acknowledge us but just keeps going forward, face completely blank, devoid of emotions or thoughts really. The other guy in the truck suggested that maybe he was in shock and had an accident. I continued rolling my truck alongside him as he trudges down the road, still trying to get his attention. Even in this extreme cold, I could occasionally get whiffs of a peculiar smell coming off him. He smelled acidic, if that makes sense. There's just a lot of things about this guy that really make my hair stand on end. Now the guy behind me is in the truck's crew cabin. Actually had enough of this. He rolled down the window and reached out to grab the guy. He later said he was just going to try and shake him and get him out of it. Now before my friend could actually reach him, he suddenly spun around and latched onto my buddy's arm. He glared at my buddy and then at me with this look of pure rage, not removing his hand from his arm. If emotions had a physical temperature, this guy could have melted everything there. My buddy groans in pain as he tries to get free. Now at that moment the guy starts screaming in our faces. There was so much hate and rage and anger in that scream, it was really terrifying. I slammed on the gas and spun out on the ice for a second before catching the wheel. The popsicle dude still had a hold of my buddy's arm, was trying to pull him out of the truck. He was running alongside the truck while the other guys in the cab held on to my friend to make sure that he stays in. After several moments, it could probably have only been a few seconds at most, my body got free from the guy and we start hauling it, getting another 30 miles out of the road. We check in with the guards and report what we've seen, and the guard looks at us like we're pulling a prank, but policy said that they had to check it out regardless. My buddy's arm was sore. When he pulled back the sleeve, you could actually see bruises there. We filed a report with the guard and we're told to head back to the camp. None of us really wanted to talk about what had just happened, and the drive the rest of the way is really quiet. We flew home the following day. The next time that we saw the guard at his shack, we asked him if he ever saw Mr. Popsicle again. He told us that they searched up and down for a solid 12 hours during their shift and never saw anything. Not even tracks in the snow leading off or anything that would indicate anyone was there. He told us it was a good prank and that he'd get us back for it next time. But it wasn't a prank. Who would make up a story like that, and who would willingly bruise up their arm that bad for a prank? Now that area of Alaska is a weird place, and my god did this experience scare me. Now, this past weekend, I was on a camping trip with some friends and my buddy, and we decided to go for a hike to scout for some elk because we're going to be hunting there next month when the season opens. So we walk through the woods and eventually wind up on 2 back roads. My buddy's carrying his daughter and we've got a couple of dogs with us. Then out of nowhere, we hear the crack of a rifle shot in the very distance and the sound of a bullet whizzing past us. We're about 10 feet apart, thinking someone's trying to shoot my dog perhaps. Maybe she looks like a coyote. I run up into the road clearing, screaming to stop shooting. I see a guy standing there with a rifle looking dumber than a box of rocks, so I pull out my pistol and tell him that he almost shot us, and he makes bizarre excuses. Now, he's acting like he's hunting for some kind of bird that's not actually here. It got pretty heated and he threatened me before my buddy told him to calm down. Plus, we had a kid with us, so this guy shouldn't have been pointing the gun in our direction. He then says, oh, he'll find me in town, even though he 100% is wrong in the situation. So my dad and grandpa like to fish and hunt a lot. One night they decided to spend the night on the river in the Appalachian Mountains. It was really late, and they said they heard these awful screams coming from the woods on the opposite side of the water. It definitely wasn't a mountain lion or anything like that. And my dad's a pretty big guy who doesn't really get scared easily, but in that moment he was absolutely frozen with fear, explaining the sound as absolutely inhuman. He felt like whatever it was wanted them to know that they were there and that they weren't happy about it. It gives him goosebumps thinking about it. Now, we used to have a stationary caravan on a campground right at the Northern Sea. So basically the campground's really small, and there was like 40 or 50 other caravans stationed there, and a few empty slots for people with tents. We stayed there for holiday 1 year and for some reason left a day earlier than we planned. On this particular night, someone got murdered right next to our caravan. It was 2 women sleeping in a rented one and the ex-boyfriend of one of the women who went to the campground at night, stabbing his ex and her friend, then dragging them out of the caravan, and they passed away right next to our one. My brother and I were going camping together. We were kind of going through a bit of a rough patch and it would help get our bond back together. We hadn't been camping for years and were somewhat excited to do so. We did it all the time when we were younger, and I guess not much had changed really. We had different lives, but we were still brothers, so we needed to fix our relationship. Now, for the first part of the trip, everything was going very well. We found a beautiful clearing to go and set up our camping site in, and that's what we done. As we head over, I noticed that my brother's hair was standing on end. I thought that was really bizarre, and before I can mention it to him, he tells me the same, and we think this is really odd. Both of our hairs are standing completely up on end, and there's a strange electric smell outside. We realise that we need to go back to the car to go and get something, so we both head back in. We ended up closing the car door and putting on the heating just so we could warm up, and I'm not joking, 1 second after turning it on, there's the loudest explosion sound of my life, and everything goes completely white, and I'm blinded temporarily. We look at each other in absolute shock and are frozen in fear. Then we hear the loudest thunder crashing immediately afterwards. We turn around and notice a fire next to our camping site. Our camping site has just been hit by a huge bolt of lightning and destroyed half of our contents there. We were literally only seconds away from death. I don't know what happened. I'll say the words and let them paint the picture for you to experience what I did. I'll set the scene. I'm an avid urban explorer and I always have been. I love nothing more than going to old abandoned buildings and seeing what I could find, but every so often you'll get far more than you're looking for. And luck would have it that one day it was going to be my turn too. Now I had a couple of friends of mine. I'm not going to say their names or my own, but I'll just call them Ben and Ryan. Now we would love going to these strange places that nobody seemed to really know about, and one day Ryan suggested a place that was really out in the middle of nowhere, and that apparently he'd only seen once before. It was an old house that apparently had quite a large basement area in it. This place had been abandoned for a long time, and I couldn't wait to get there and explore. Now the problem was actually finding the place. Now we had to drive for a good 4 or so hours to actually reach roughly where it should have been, and we were truly driving out into the middle of nowhere to get here. Now the drive was beautiful. It was a lovely warm summer's day, and the heat really made you feel comfortable. We're having a really good time making some jokes with each other and having a laugh generally. We ended up pulling up to basically exactly where the spot is supposed to be, and there's nothing there. A little confused, Ryan offers to walk off ahead of us to find the place. I sit on the trunk of the car with Ben and it's pleasantly warm in the summer heat. Now we truly are out in the sticks here with not much around us and not many sounds, just the odd crickets and maybe water bugs or whatever else is out here. We actually have to be careful of different scorpions and other animals like that. Eventually we can hear, "Hey, come over here, you guys have got to check this out." Excitedly, me and Ben jump up and go and see what Ryan's making fuss about, and there it is. Just off in the horizon is an old building. This thing was really big. Like, not a mansion, but just under the size of it. and it looks beautiful. If I had to guess, I would say this thing sat abandoned pretty much since the day that somebody first went in there. Now, I have this pretty nice feeling that's almost inviting, and it's something I can't really describe. It's almost like something was drawing me in there. The other two seem a little more hesitant than me to go in, but I'm really excited now. And we start making our way over there. While walking, I'm struck with how happy I feel. It's almost like a high that I can't describe. Almost like I was coming to something that I was truly belonging to. I look over to my two friends and they don't seem as excited as me, just more focused on getting there and somewhat hesitant. I laugh and say, hey, come on guys, it's gonna be fine, there's literally nothing to worry about. Come on, this is gonna be great. Now, as always, we never go through the front door, just in case there's anybody living there that's not supposed to be, or any kind of animals that are looking for food, so we decide to go around the back. This place has a beautiful porch and it's just really pretty. We realise that there's a window that we can prop open to enter, and I opt to go first. I slowly pry the window open and manage to pop it up. While opening the window, I actually get a splinter in my hand, but strangely I can't feel it at all. It's quite a big and nasty one too, and I head in. I then turn around to help my two friends get in too. I turn and say, come on, get in. And Ben's quite hesitant about going in, saying, I don't know why, I have a really bad feeling about this. I say, come on, stop being stupid, it's gonna be great. We drove out here all this way, and he reluctantly follows in. And so does Ryan. Now all three of us are here. Now the building smells old, but as I turn around, I'm suddenly struck by how nice this place is. It's basically a time capsule, and it almost feels odd. I feel weirdly welcome and like I'm at home now, and we slowly make our way through the first room, out of the kitchen. Now there's no food of course, but honestly, if we open the fridge and see some, it wouldn't surprise me. My two other friends have started to warm into it now, and they're starting to enjoy the experience too. We decide that we're going to first explore the upstairs parts of the house, and then we're going to explore the ground level. We now come into a massive main hall or living area, which still has a chair there that looks like it's never been used before, and a really old clock. For some reason I keep being drawn towards the clock, and I'm not sure why this is. Of course it's sitting timeless, but it kind of emphasizes the feel of the whole situation. It really feels like we've stepped back in time at this point, and I just really feel welcome here, and I don't know why. We decide that we're going to attack the upstairs, and we all go up there, with me leading the way. I take a couple of steps onto the stairs, and I almost feel like I know my way round. It's really bizarre, but I seem to kind of know the layout in my head naturally. We get to the very top, and I first go into the bathroom. I look out of the window, and it's really a beautiful summer's day, and the other two split off, exploring some old bedrooms and things. I go to turn on the tap, and there's no water whatsoever. I try and run the bath, but again there's nothing. I turn around and head over to my friends who are in the other rooms. They're inside the main bedroom now, and they're sitting on the bed. I lay on the bed and it's extremely comfortable. My friends say let's explore the other rooms, and I say I'll catch up with you in a minute. I lay back, and for some reason I can't seem to help but smile. I feel really at peace now, and for some reason something's drawing me into the lower level of the house. Now I tell my friends that I'm gonna go and investigate further, and they say okay, and I start heading down the stairs. I feel very happy and kind of glide down, almost like I'm in a dream. Now it's really bizarre, it really is like stepping into a museum or time capsule. Everything's just perfect, almost too perfect. I make my way into another room next to the kitchen, and I realise that there's a large picture frame here and a cabinet. I almost feel drawn to this spot and I don't know why. I go to move the picture frame in case there's something else next to it, like a picture that's fell off, and I realise that it starts to fall down. I quickly steady myself, bracing to catch it, and then I realise it's a door. I can slowly pull it open and it silently releases, and there's a stairway behind it. I'm looking into the darkness when I realise that there's a light switch next to me. I flick it, and to my surprise, the lights come on, and I can see a little further down. The staircase winds down, and I slowly close the picture behind me on its hinges and close the door. I'm not sure why that I didn't tell my friends where I was going, but I decide that I have to press on and explore further. I make my way down the stairs and turn, and I'm suddenly met with a couple of doors in a large room. I can't believe how big this place is. I don't know what door to go to, but I seem almost drawn to one. It's the one directly ahead of me. I open it, and I'm met by the light from the switch that I've just turned on. There's just a single light hanging from the ceiling there, and more rooms. I think this is odd, and think maybe they didn't finish furnishing down here, or maybe it was some kind of bunker, I don't know what, but it's kind of weird. There's no furniture whatsoever here, and again, I'm drawn to keep going forward. I don't know what was in those other rooms to my left and right, but I open the door ahead of me, and I'm met with a very long corridor. It's almost impossibly long, and there's a light leading down to the end, but I can't really see what's down there. Maybe this was some kind of escape hatch or something, just in case there was an emergency, and it probably comes out somewhere else, and I think this is really cool, and decide that I need to investigate it. And this feeling, I can't describe this feeling of being completely drawn into somewhere, almost like it was calling me to go further. I decide that before I go on, I should see what else there is, and I close this door. I then turn around and open another one to my left, and it's the same again, an empty room with 4 doors, which is actually very confusing to me. I continue ahead and I start to feel quite lightheaded. I think maybe the air's not so good down here, and I turn around and come out the one I've just went to, but there's nothing but more doors in here. Starting to panic now, I'm not sure exactly where I am, and I call out for my friend's name, but there's no reply. I do it again and I'm met with silence. I can now hear a scratching on the side of one of the doors that I've just come from. I hesitantly open it thinking it's them, and I'm met with that corridor once more. I feel absolutely drawn in this moment to go further down, and I hear a door close behind me. I turn around and for some reason I'm at peace once again, and I feel like I just have to go on further. I'm completely disorientated at this point and I don't really know how to get back, and I think my way out might be up ahead of me. I decide that I shouldn't go on without my friends, and I stare down into that corridor, almost in a trance. I don't know what I was looking for or looking at, but there was something there, and it feels like everything around me goes black and all I can see is the end of that tunnel and another door. I have to know what's in it, and I have to investigate it. But maybe, just maybe, I should get the others. I turn around now and come back in again. I go straight and straight, but become completely disorientated as I close the second door behind me and there's just more doors. I go to open the one to my left and I realise that it doesn't open. There's another one behind me and it's the same again. Now I think my panic might have set in finally, and I feel my heart beat through my hands. My hands are now shaking as I open another door and it's the same again. But this time, I know that it's going to lead me to the corridor because I can see the light coming down it, and now I'm really confused. I call out once again for my friends and I'm met with silence, and I swear every so often I can hear some kind of footsteps behind me, and that's when everything went black. The next thing I know, I'm being moved but can't see anything, and I'm being slapped with water poured over my head. I'm very disorientated and confused about what's happening, until then I realise it's one of my friends calling out my name saying, "You've got to drink this water," and I suddenly come through. I go to wipe my face and I realise that I'm absolutely drenched in a cold sweat, and they say, "Thank God, we thought we were going to lose you for a second." I can then see the car just up ahead and I feel very weak, almost like I can't move. I keep on seeing black sparks everywhere where I'm not with it. They hold the water to my mouth and say, "You've got a drink," and I nod and start drinking water like I've never drank before. I say what happened and they said, "We couldn't find you for hours. We were looking for you and getting really worried. Then we realised that the picture was off the frame and investigated it and found the way down that you went. We found you in the very bottom of the stairs, covered in sweat, with some big marks across your arm and on your back." I say, "What marks?" My friend then lifts up my shirt and points, and there's very large scratch marks on my back and on the backs of my arms. I can't believe it. I say, "How does this happen? What happened to me?" And they say, "We don't know. I told them I was screaming out for you guys, but you didn't reply." My friends then look at each other and say, "We didn't hear a thing. We just thought you fell over and got hurt." And now the three of us lock eyes. Without saying anything, my friend quickly gets onto the ignition and floors it, and we slowly speed out of there. As we quickly drive away, I then explain to my friends what happened as I'm more with it now, and then they give their story and look very scared. They say that I disappeared for literally hours without making a sound, and they kept calling out for me but couldn't hear anything, just some kind of laughter coming from somewhere else that they thought was me. I said laughing, "No, I wasn't laughing whatsoever," and my friend Ben goes very pale suddenly. He then says, "Let's never go back to this place again. I don't know if we're alone in there." And we drive off, making the rest of the trip back until eventually stopping to get some food after 3 or so hours and more water. I pretty much felt fine again after this, and we put it down to me being extremely dehydrated, but we can't make sense of what happened. It doesn't make sense how I got lost, so lost down there. We agreed that something was completely wrong and that we vowed never to go back there again to explore it. Now, I don't know whether this house was designed like the Winchester Mystery House and some crazy person made it really confusing, but I don't understand what happened. I don't understand how I got so lost with such a simple thing to do, or why I felt so drawn down there, and I'm sure something was down there with me. One of my friends later on decided to go back with some of his other friends just to confirm that the place was actually there, but they could never find it. The scariest part for me is not knowing what happened to me, or how I got all of them scratches on my back, or what was at the end of that tunnel.